Hi there, folks. Saber4 here with part two of the Secrets of Power spoiler season. Um, just wanted to jump back in and kind of get restarted on where we have talked about things before. If you have not done so already, please subscribe to the channel. Please, it helps out a lot with growth. Please like the videos. It helps out a lot with reach. Here's what we're going to talk about coming up. First off, it has been a while. We'll get a little bit of the reasoning behind the lack of updates. We'll get a leader spotlight, and I'm going to talk a little bit about each, both in deck building and in what they're going to mean in sealed play. And then we'll talk about some of the cards by aspect that have been released since the last time I was able to sit down and do a video. And we'll do that, as you see here, with Vigilance, Command, Aggression, Cunning, and Villainy. There's not just a ton to talk about yet in Heroism or Neutral, so we'll go ahead and dive on in. First off, it has been a while. Life happens. My work has gotten a little bit different schedule and a little bit different of a timetable responsibilities than I had previously. That has left a lot more on my plate during the day and a lot less time on my plate at night. So, still working on this, still enjoy this channel, still enjoy being a part of the Star Wars Unlimited community, but have resourced a little bit more of my time towards playing rather than this. And then I am a big college football nerd, so I watch a lot of that on the weekends. I have been the writer and have worked on podcasts for that for several years prior to this. And so that does consume quite a bit of my time during football season. The working projects that we have right now. So I have enjoyed doing the Defeat the Meta decks since we had Force Throw taken out, and now that we have had a major qualifier go through, we've got enough tournaments again to kind of look at and establish a new meta following in the wake of Force Throw. So we'll talk about the updates to Defeat the Meta decks. Spoiler season continues. That is the main point of this video. Win Your Prerelease, a big thing that we have had over the past several sets. We'll talk about what cards to deal with in your pre-release, what to look for when you're cracking those boxes open, how to build some of those decks, and how to build them to win a sealed event. As we get a little bit more of the cards, we'll do Secrets of Power card rankings. I like to do that typically by rarity and kind of talk about what in each of those rarities has the most interesting stuff. And then we'll do some deck builds. Keeping in mind that the deck builds right now are focused on the largest card pool that we're going to have. This is going to be set 6. When set 7 comes, we will rotate out. Don't know yet which staples will be rotated out. There is, a little bit of speculation which things are going to be continued, but there's no guarantees at this point. So until we start to get some set 7 cards, we don't know if we're going to, are we going to lose things like Power of the Dark Side? Are we going to keep things like Luke Skywalker? I assume that we're going to keep things like the aspect cards, but who knows? Anyway, until that happens, it's all kind of speculation, but we'll build some decks as we get a little bit more of this card pool. So, moving on. Let's talk about a couple of the Vigilance leaders here. I put both of these on this slide, mostly because they share the same cost. Leia is an interesting one, especially for sealed. We're going to disclose a card from our hand to gain an experience token on something that's on our board. There is a lot of good stuff in this set, especially officials that are on the lower end of the cost curve. And depending on what I build, it really doesn't matter what I put in. As long as it is a single aspect card, I can put something in there and be almost guaranteed to show a card that's out of aspect. Instead of resourcing it like I normally would in previous sets, use it as my experience token generator. Note here that sharing an aspect means both. And so Leia here, for example, is Vigilance Heroism. If I showed another card that was Command Heroism, it still shares an aspect with Leia, and so would not be able to grant an experience token to her. Similar things work to any of your cards that are on the table, making sure that you have something, if you were building around Command and Vigilance, putting a aggression only couple of cards in your deck, especially in a 30 card pool, in that last couple of spots where you really you'd run out, you'd played 24 cards that you were happy with, and now I've got 25, 26, here we go, these are the last pair. All right, now a couple of cards out of aspect, completely out of aspect, so that you can automatically get the experience tokens if you have them in your hand. Lamassu. Although there are not tons and tons and tons of upgrades in this particular set yet, what we have seen here is that Lamassu will allow you to play upgrades on your units for a cost of 1 damage to that unit. You can play it for 1 less. Now, this does mean that certain things will allow you to exhaust a unit for free, because you are gaining back that 1 health. You're going to wind up with a damaged unit, but you're gaining back that 1 health. You also are able to play upgrades with a little bit less of a penalty, because you are able to play them from discard as long as he survives an attack. The stats on both of these are okay. 3-7 we've seen on 5s before. It's not a wonderful stat line for a leader. 4-7 is a little nicer, but again, this was the banned Boba Fett stat line. The original one was a 4-7. So here we're looking at a couple of leaders who are a little bit higher in the cost curve, but have some interesting abilities. Leia especially so when we talk about sealed play. Command. Yularen. Yularen is an interesting one here. We haven't had quite the same ability in a villainy card or leader that we have with Yularen. And what he's going to allow us to do is to chain attacks together. You have to attack with the larger unit first, which means that you would need to do this probably on your 3rd total turn, provided that somebody has not taken out one of the smaller units. But attack with a unit, attack with another. Action cheating. Being able to stack things and to compress actions into one small chain. Yularen is going to play aggressively. He's going to be able to gain or steal that initiative. And as long as your opponent does not pick off one of your smaller units and leaves you with a couple to attack with, you're going to be able to attack with them in sequence very quickly. Same thing when he is on the board. He's going to act as your 5. He can attack with your 4, anything that's under. 4-6 on 5, this is a much nicer stat line. This is very similar to what Leia has above, but a turn earlier. We'll work with that. Bail Organa. We finally have a version of him that might not suck, though there's a couple of interesting things to note about him here. Number 1, he is a 4 deploy. That is a nice cheap stat line, especially when you consider that he's a 3/3 body. Like many of the things in this set, he is an official. And when you play a card from your resources, that means that you can play with plot, you can play with smuggle, you can play however you want to get that card out of your resources. When you play one from there and he is on the table, heal a damage from your base. What's interesting here is that he is the 2nd leader that we have who is able to multi-deploy, and is able to multi-deploy as a unit. There were ways that you could do this with a 3rd one if you really, really tried and got Poe on the table. But Admiral Trench had an ability here that was able to multi-deploy. The cost for Admiral Trench was resources. The cost for Bail Organa is cards from your hand. And as long as you have 4, you can action him as a non-epic action, discard 2 cards from your hand, put him on the field. Now, why that's interesting here is that this and his leader action are mutually exclusive. If a friendly unit was defeated this phase, that is exhaust the leader. So you cannot both play his action as a leader and play his action to deploy him in the same phase. Mon Mothma. Here we have a 3/7, a very common stat line. This is the same stat line that we had with, say, Quinlan Voss. This is an ability that is very similar to what we saw with Hera, and the same color as Hera, except that we have a lot more officials than what we had for Spectres. Uh, it's not quite as powerful an ability on her. It's not quite as powerful ability on her flip side, in that she does not grant an experience token on attack. However, each other friendly official gains +0/+1. So everything, if you tie your deck to officials, is going to gain a bigger butt. Spy tokens become a 0/3 instead of a 0/2, and 0/3s with raid 2 that you can generate a lot of. Other things that are on your deck, that are on your table that are officials, are going to be bigger butts. So Mon Mothma gets some interesting play here, especially in a sealed set where you are talking about all aspect penalties being removed from non-villainy. She can play 4 color and just play your events or your other secondary cards in whatever is best, and then play every other official that you can touch. So this is an interesting one and a good build around when we're talking about sealed play. Governor Price. Here's one who is looking for token units, and there are a lot of token generation actions and a lot of token generation cards that are going to be coming with this set. She allows you as an action to ready a token unit, and then on her unit side, 4/6, not wonderful stats, 4/6, but she does create spy tokens, and she is +1/+0 for each ready friendly token. So if you have several spy tokens and you flip her early, your opponents are going to have to either pick out a way to get rid of multiple spy tokens or other token units in order to trim her down, or they're going to have to attack into a large attack, because this is not raid for it. This is just a +1/+0. Luthen Rail, another really interesting build around, especially when we're talking about sealed, where you are spending most of your time bashing units into units. He gives you a payoff, because when one of your friendly units is defeated while attacking, you can deal 1 damage to a unit or base, and that is 2 damage to a unit or base when he is flipped to his unit side. Our cunning leaders, we got 4 of these. Sly Moore is a token generator. She is for a cost token generator, and she has to have a lot of exhausted units on the board. This is significantly less efficient than what Darth Vader did, but I would argue that the spy tokens are probably a little bit more beneficial. They certainly are. They're certainly the same statted, but taking out an O2 is costly, because you still have to go in and burn a lot of actions to do it. C3PO. This is an interesting one when we start talking about constructed play. Babu Frick comes in under C3PO, and creates a 6/1 on attack, or creates a 6/6 on attack, because you attack with it, you don't defend with the other number. So it creates a 6 as long as his health is still that high. You could potentially upgrade him and make him a much more powerful attacker. You also can do some interesting things with him as far as his ability. It is very slow when you're talking about tempo in the early game. You would have to play a card and then attack so that you have an exhausted unit, or attack with something and then your second attack or your second action manages to exhaust something. So it's a very telegraphed play. However, he is also a rebel. And so if you start looking at this as a constructed piece of play, this could be an interesting leader for tempo, because we're talking about the ability to do something like Rebel Assault, attack with a unit, and then attack with 3PO and exhaust something, and that is a lot of action compression, because you're attacking with 2 units and denying an action all at once, which is a pretty powerful way to do things. somebody's going to correct me no matter which way I try to say it. So Sabe, we're going with that. Leader released today. Had a little bit of time to look at it. This is an interesting setup. And so what she does is that she's going to allow you to set up your opponent's hand and to kind of know what's coming. You are able to filter things for them in a way that they do not like. Discarding the card of your choice from the top two cards of their deck, as long as you have dealt combat damage to a base. So this is a very interesting way to do things because she is a nice quick flip. 3/6 on 5 is nice. 3/6 raid 1 on 5 is very nice. And as long as she does combat damage to a base, you can look at an opponent's hand and discard a card from it. Now, you've had the opportunity to set this up and to move off some of the cards that you don't like, and to leave them with kind of the weakest draw option. Although it is a little bit slow because you're going to do this on no earlier than your second action of the turn, or your third action of the turn, because you have to deal friendly damage first. It is something where you could effectively neuter some of your opponent's hand. And then DJ, we have our first leader that is a dual single aspect. We've had single aspect leaders before in heroism and villainy, with Anakin and Revan respectively. And now we have DJ coming back with a double cunning. This to me is more interesting when we start talking about constructed play, specifically Twin Suns, because previously you would have had to have played two different things on a leader and you'd have either had to play two leaders that were cunning, or you'd have had to have played a cunning base with a leader or something like that to get double aspect without penalty. Now you can just play DJ and still get a second aspect, and still get access to a third aspect through your base. The interesting part here is that he allows you to discount cards that come in as long as you have something on the table, because it is going to, as long as you can set this up and have win played abilities, the card that is going to come in and get played gets captured by something else friendly. Now, this also means that you are able to, when DJ flips, you are able to bash that unit into something, defeat the unit that's there, bring back in your captured unit, and bring that captured unit in ready. And so, what's the likelihood that you're going to have several of these on a 6 deploy? Pretty low. What's the likelihood that you're going to be able to add an extra attack to your 6 resource turn? Relatively high, because you've got a kind of protected unit back there behind the wall of a captured unit, that your opponent either has to deal with and then gives you back a readied unit, or you can slam into one of theirs and then give yourself a readied unit in the background. It's an interesting way to deal with sentinels, to kind of take something out and still have a ready unit to play. A lot of interesting times building around this one so far. All right, let's go through some cards by aspect. Darth Sion. We have the Sith Triumvirate that came out with the last little wave of them. I am very happy to see a lot of these because it means that we are delving further into the Old Republic set, and I loved that couple of video games. This is from the second version of that, and the Sith Lords, which saw Darth Sion, Darth Nihilus, and Darth Kreia. Interesting, thematic. Love the way they've set this up. Experience token for each enemy unit that was defeated this phase. And as long as you've defeated 2 and you put him on the board, he comes back to your hand. when he's defeated. And so this is, this doesn't have quite the same just slam it down impact that some other things do at 5. But it does have a very thematic feel to it. Defeating units is going to be pretty easy to do, has always been pretty easy to do. And, if you take out a couple and then you put this guy down, you've got a 7/7 threat that is a real powerhouse and a real threat to just come back to somebody's hand. Interesting card. Thematic. Love the set. Really happy they're delving into those games. Emergency powers could also work with that because here's a way that you can really power some things up. Axe Wolves from the previous set, play emergency powers on him. He's +1/+1 for every upgrade that's on him. Each of the experience tokens is an upgrade. It's effectively +2/+2. This is a fantastic card to play on that guy. Turn 3 of the game, you're paying 3 resources. You're adding +6/+6 to him because you're getting 3 experience tokens. That's just absolutely nuts. Really interesting card there. Some interesting build around. Gonna find some ways to play with this one. Great card, even if you wind up pulling it in any kind of build that you can get for sealed. Zam Wetzel, nice early card. Underworld unit, which is helpful for a lot of things. If she is upgraded, she gains grit. Again, emergency powers. You can stack a couple of experience tokens on her on turn, on game turn number 2. Wind up with a 3/7 that now gets grit. Pretty powerful stuff. Lando has grit straight out, and when played, has a nice ability that you are able to deal with. This is what you should expect out of kind of a legendary card here. Doesn't have heroism villainy, so is able to kind of play on both sides. Again, thematic, well designed. Choose an enemy unit and another friendly non-leader unit. If you do, heal 6 damage from your base, and the enemy captures the friendly unit. Easy to kind of put that in play. You get to choose what gets captured. You get to get it back, after it's captured. Once you kind of deal with it, but this is a 6/8 to deal with. It's a very hard unit to just attack into because it's got a lot of health pool, and the bigger you attack into it, the harder it hits back. So interesting here. Plus, it does the heal 6. Really well set up. Cassian, another kind of interesting one here, especially as we start talking about losing things like open fire. When it's defending, the attacker is -2/-0. Going to be really hard to kill it with a first turn unit. And if an enemy card ability would deal damage to it, prevent 2. This is great protection in heroism from Cad Bane. Enemy card unit would deal damage. All right, cool. Well, it's got essentially Boba Fett's armor built into it. So every time you're going to deal damage to it with a card ability, -2. Attacking into it, -2. This is Boba Fett's armor built into a 2-drop. 2/2, okay. We've had that stat line on plenty of things, but a 2/2 that's this hard to kill, quite nice. So we've got a lot of officials. Here, the sponsor. Yeah, here's a 2/3 for 2 with Restore 2. This is just a great play, especially out of something like Leia, or to be out of aspect when we're talking about Mon Mothma. Just restoring 2 at the beginning of the game makes a lot of your opponent's first couple of attacks entirely irrelevant. This is something that Rey could put an experience token on. This is something that a lot of things can kind of build around. This is an official, which matters a lot for a lot of the things that are in this set. Interesting card for a common. Like this is probably going to be one of the better commons in the set, especially when you're talking about sealed play. Command. Laws are another of the interesting things in here, and there are several already. Um, some of them are plot cards, as specifically trade route taxation. Choose an opponent as long as you control more units than they do, which because of plot, you're going to have an opportunity to. You are deploying your leader. Quite often, you're going to be deploying your leader, and you might deploy a unit as well, and then pull this. And so if you pull this from that plot space, you can prevent your opponents from playing events this phase, kind of locking them out of a couple of things and locking them out potentially from things that are in their plot space. So this is a really interesting piece of the puzzle when you are building around some plot mechanic. This works out and constructed too. It's one of the few things that I've seen that might offer you some protection outside of the plot, but from the plot space, quite powerful. Droid control ship. I misread this at first. Thought that it was going to cost less for each droid that you could exhaust to bring it in with those droids, and that putting 3 on the board might make a ridiculous way to bring this in super early. Thankfully, I was incorrect because it would be kind of breaking to do that. But it does cost 1 less for each friendly droid unit in play. There are plenty of ways to get a lot of droid units into play. And so bringing this down sometime significantly earlier also makes those droids into resources. That in itself can be kind of game breaking, because all of a sudden, if your opponents aren't dealing with these little 1/1 droids, and some of those droids spawn themselves into other droids, then they're going to have problems, because suddenly if you had 3 of those things, 4 of those things on the table, now next turn you have either 4 opportunities to attack or 4 extra resources. Director Krennic, how we made the biggest body Director Krennic is beyond me, but a Sentinel that is a do nothing, beyond being a big beefy Sentinel, is an interesting choice for a legendary. Um, you know, Fitting the theme of dark side cards as legendaries in green that are way too expensive to play. Here we go. But when he is attacked, discard a card from your deck. If it is a unit, bring it to your hand. In unit-based control, pretty good. Gonna kill most things that attack into him. Gonna be a hard stall on the ground for at least a turn, as long as your opponent doesn't have something to just deal with it. But otherwise, there's better. We have another legendary upgrade. I say that because the constructed lightsaber was a legendary upgrade. But here we have a heroism-sided legendary upgrade. Interesting. We're not getting plot out of this, which is probably for the best, because being able to put plot on something with that would be just absurd. But a +2/+2 for 3, not terrible. +2/+2 that every other unit, other friendly units, as long as this thing isn't exhausted, gain overwhelm, raid 1, restore 1. You can put a lot of stats into this. This is the ability to really kind of beef up a lot of things on your board. I managed to put trade route taxation on here twice. I'm not sure how that happened. It still works exactly the same as when I explained it on the previous slide. Oh well. But Jar Jar Binks, that's an interesting one here. When played, give another friendly unit +2/+2. That's great. Because he's plot, you're going to be able to pop him out, get something that's benefited from it because he's only a 2/1. Not the most useful thing in your hand, but a +2/+2 buff, and a kind of annoying card to have to get rid of with 1 damage. A little bit more useful than his original version, which dealt 2 damage to a thing totally at random in the game. But yeah, we've got another Jar Jar. because we needed one of those. Aggression, Dryden Voss, we're going to go through these a little faster. Being able to double his attack when he attacks, but he doesn't ready for the next phase. This is interesting because if you can, there are plenty of ways to beef up his attack and then double it. And so there's a lot of ways that you can make him hit a lot harder than he should at the cost of him not readying next round. And in ways where you can really pop the game open, that's fine. Confidence in victory. Here is the gambit that they were talking about. This is only played as your first action of a phase. Choose an arena. And if at the end of the regroup phase, you're the only player with units in that arena, you win. We're talking at a 10 cost. And so this is a late game play. But at a lot of times, if you have been able to keep your opponent's hand small, get them to a spot where, you've got a couple of sentinels in an arena or something like that, and you've got control of something, maybe. And it might bring you to the conclusion of the game a couple of turns faster. But in a lot of cases, I think this is a win more. And who knows? Cool picture. Imperial Occupier is a good one, especially when we start talking about going up to pride or price. 2/2 for 2, great. Those stats are fine. Common 2/2 for 2. Gonna see a lot of play in sealed. Common 2/2 for 2. When defeated, create a spy token. Excellent, because it's going to leave behind an O2, but an O2 raid 2. And so, yeah, this is a good one, especially for sealed play. Kaz here might be one of the better plays with plot, just because you have the ability to put a 5/5 on the board and still go ahead and make your attack. When played, you can attack with a unit. Cool. Let's do that. Action compression is fun. Aggressive negotiations, you can punish people for having a big hand or for you having a big hand, which is quite nice. Again, thematic, dipping back into the Knights of the Old Republic series. Warrior of Clan Ordo, a Mandalorian. Mandalorian in red. Quite nice. We've got some Mandalorians. We've got some red. We've got some reason to have Mandalorians in red. But disclose here. And if you don't disclose aggression, deal 2 damage to your base. Okay. I'm playing aggression anyway. I should be able to do that without any difficulty. And if I'm playing aggression and I'm playing aggressively with it, and I've run out of cards, okay, I'm still going to deal 3. But thematic, fun, yeah, Mandalorian, make it work. Some cunning cards. Anakin Skywalker is the return of the Hidden. He is from the starter set. I think I've talked about him earlier. But the big thing here is that we have Hidden again. Same thing with the Handmaiden. You can discard a card from your hand. If you do draw a card, we have Filtering. If you get one of these that happens to be in a sealed pack because you got set cards now in some of those spaces, this can be nice for filtering. This is a 1/1 for this is a 2/2 for 1, which is better than most stat rates. So a very good card to play. Experience token to rebels. Sneaking Suspicion is a fun one. It's a terrible, terrible card to play. You put it down as plot and it goes +1/+1. Does nothing else. Why it is in here is beyond me. As far as in the set, give me a +2 of something, maybe, or give it something that it does. And this is a better card, but just a random +1/+1. I mean, I suppose if you're playing this for 1, it's maybe a little better. But if you're playing it for 1, you're still doing 1 damage to your unit. This is an example of try harder. Hunter and the Mandalorian, 2 things that we know pretty well. Hunter is a really nice unit for clearing other units out, or as a saboteur with a nice big attack. Mandalorian with an ambush and being able to capture. Quite interesting. Let's look at the villains here to close out. Oh, that's what I meant to put in. I meant to put in Darth Treya. Anyway, Darth Treya is the part of the infinite loop that we'll talk about in a later video. Elia Kane, 3-6 raid 1 for 4. Not wonderful stat line overall. If you're doing this early, you can defeat a resource, so being able to clear out some plot or to understand what's in your opponent's resources for plot can be quite powerful. She does this at a time when other things are kind of set up. 3-6 raid 1, attacking for 4. Okay, that's fine. We don't get quite the utility that we got out of, say, Lom Pike with that, but that's the same stat line, and we were quite okay with playing him. Contempt for Culture might be one of the best sleeper cards in this set, especially with as much stuff early as that is going to be 2 health. Deal 2 damage to a non-vehicle unit, create a spy token. I can play this turn 1, deal with your turn 1 play, create an O2 Ray 2 official. That's how you need to read this card if you were looking at it in sealed play. And then Darth Nihilus, probably the least explored of the villains in the Sith Triumvirate in the Old Republic set. But again, very thematic, very fun, interesting to close out with him when we started off with his counterpart. And interesting to see here both when played and on attack. So he has useful text to be able to drop down. Deals 3 damage to the unit with the least remaining HP among all other units. Now keep in mind that might include one of yours. But if multiple units are tied, you get to choose one. If it's a non-vehicle, give an experience token to this unit. So again, something that can drop in, immediately become a 7/7. That's not quite as nice as being able to do that if you have defeated units from the beginning and play it for 5, but starts out as a 6/6, probably a 7/7 when you play it. Thematic, entertaining, very happy to be delving into that video game. That's all we have for this time. As we said, we're going to be looking at some of the things with exploring how to beat the new meta decks, exploring a little bit more about the remainder of Secrets of Power spoilers, and talking about how to win pre-releases. As we get a few more of these cards, we'll talk kind of what some of the best cards for pre-release and some of the best cards to put into your decks are going to be. Hope you'll stick around. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and we will see you next time.